Hi, this is Kevin Conroy, and you're listening to the Geekcast Radio Network.
There is nothing wrong with your podcast player. Do not attempt to adjust the volume. Hello and welcome into our studio. This is Studio 2009. Of course, I am TFO and Mike. Joining me for the latest podcast approach is is the producer himself over there at This Week in Geek, Mr. Alex Ricci. Hello, sir.
Hello, man. It's been a while.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. Yeah. And we're here to get Alex's podcast approach. He is going to answer the 30 questions that we have. Kicking it off, when did you discover a podcast, and what was the first one you listened to?
Discovering podcasts, I was working, like I had heard of them. I'd heard of internet radio shows dating back to the 90s, but I would say when I was working at Future Shop, which was Canada's arm of Best Buy, I picked up my first iPod, and I think it was called the iPod Classic at the time. Like, they had already had the iPod Video, but this was
right
like when they first launched the Classic that had the full color screen where you could watch videos on it and everything. And I got it when they had like a staff discount, because usually they didn't. This is in like 2006 or 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And I had high-speed internet. We didn't have like a data cap. We were like one of the only families that didn't at the time. So I was like, I'm going to listen to some of these shows. And I think audio podcast-wise, I think one of the first ones I would have downloaded was something related to the Space Channel, which we had. It's like our version of the Sci-Fi Channel. I think they had one sort of dedicated to shows on there and like interviews and that. And then there was a video podcast that I was watching, and I don't remember the exact name of it, but it was sort of what would evolve to become a lot of the variety YouTube type shows, where it would be like gamers and hackers and stuff figuring out how to like tinker around with robots and things. And it was sort of a variety of like, here's a quick hack on your computer on how to make it run faster. Here's some gaming information. Here's how to do a mod chip. There was all that sort of stuff done at the time. And then I would say I was gravitating towards like pulling whatever I could get in. And I think it was actually This Week in Geek was one of the first ones, because at the time there was very little in the Canadian iPod market space, where it was a lot easier for indies to just pop up to the top of the charts. And you would go in and you'd go, all right, let me just sample these next 5 in the top 10 chart. And I believe that's how I found This Week in Geek. And I think through that, like a year or two later, it would have been about, I think probably 2009. Mm-hmm. I think it's when I stumbled across your podcast where you're running through TFG1.
Oh, God. Nightmarish audio.
And again, remember those early days of like 06 to 010 or to 2010, it wasn't like there was a million other podcasts out there. So
no,
it was a lot easier to stumble upon new things that were like, a little out there.
Yeah. You go on Spotify or Apple or whatever you want to use for your podcatching. I use Spotify, and you just look up Transformers, or you look up Star Wars, or you look up, whatever. Hell, you just search animation or cartoons. There are a million different podcasts now but back then, whew.
Yeah, if you're going like 12 to 15 years ago, and especially even earlier, you were looking at maybe like 1 or 2. Like there might have been like 4 in the States, but in Canada, like because the stores were sort of separated a little bit. Like sure, you could market your stuff in different countries, but they used to promote things that were local too. So it was easier for if you lived in the UK to find a UK-based fan podcast versus the American. Now it's all sort of blended into this one global store front. But yeah, you're right. Like you could look, and if you looked up Transformers, there might be a random episode or 2, but there might have been like 1 or 2 shows dedicated to the fandom. And now it's like handfuls.
Yeah. I mean, the oldest one I can remember, even though I wasn't listening to it back then, and they still call it an internet radio show versus a podcast, which is Radio Free Cybertron. Brian Kilby and them started that in 1999. That is the earliest podcast that I remember, them say, but really between 04 and 07, that's where it really started, and that's where it kind of was burgeoning. And by 08 and 9 and 10 and 11, by 2012 and beyond, you've got so many things and new things pop up every day. But it's great because you can find shows and people that you want to listen to.
I think there should be one thing, and I know it's not part of the question and answer directly. Mm-hmm. I think that something that all the podcasters should do is have a filtered option so that when you go to search for a new podcast, that you can decide to filter out something that hasn't had a new episode in 6 months or longer.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of dead podcasts that even tried to copy This Week in Geek's name almost to a T. That if you go searching for This Week in Geek, and there's still a few of them, there's about 3 or 4, and I think one had a random episode pop up after 3 or 4 years, and sometimes due to however the optimization is, they'll pop up first, and then you go to look, and you're like, oh wait, you haven't had an episode since 2014 or 2017, and you had maybe 30 episodes, and then you go to look for us, and we got like 700.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it would be nice if they could differentiate, and iTunes would let you do that. Be like, hey, iTunes or Spotify,
whatever it is,
show me active shows, because I think that would filter out a lot of the stuff
And the thing of it is that when I started and when we started GCRN and whatever, certain shows I wanted to be review shows where they have a beginning and an ending.
Yep.
Obviously, Tooncast can go on forever. It can whatever. It's all cartoons all the time. Same thing, even though we ended Movie Week in Review, but even with this show with Studio, these shows that we're doing now can go on forever. But like you have something like the Transformers Generation 1 podcast or Beast Unleashed or whatever, generally I have an endpoint, and that's why essentially they turn into dead shows, because the way I look at an audio podcast like an 80s cartoon. You got the intro, you got the whole show, whatever's in the middle, and you got the closing, and that's it. And that's it's an audio version of a TV show is how I look at it. That's how I've always looked at it. So, G1 only had 98 episodes.
Well, you know what? Maybe I'll refine what I was saying. Maybe there should be 3 main categories of searching outside of, obviously, like I want to look for sports. I want to look for this.
Right.
I think you should have ones that are for weekly variety shows, like we are, where we're sort of a catch-all, where we have multiple episodes a week. And that's an ongoing thing that has no end in sight. You should be able to search for that for active shows. You should be able to search for ones that were a complete like drama series or something, where you have think like Dr. Death, or one of those ones where there's it's a mini series. Yeah. And then you should have ones, like you said, for ones that are you have a finite end, but are maybe a little more open-ended in that you might have more than 6 or 12 episodes. You'll have 90, 100, 200. Because I know that Spreaker and some other hosts will let you differentiate how it's your podcast feed is shown, where it'll show, like, instead of the most recent episode and starting with the most recent episode, which is what you traditionally did, you can actually set it so that it will start at episode 1 and go through the feed that way backwards for people that have that kind of show. But I don't think most people look for that yet.
No, I don't think so either. How long after you started listening did you want to start your own show?
Started in 07. I think I had inklings in 2010 or 2011, but it was sort of finding, what's the right platform? What's the right idea? Is it something I'm interested in actually following through with, or is it something that's going to, die on the vine?
Yeah, there are no more Vines. Vine is dead. Vine hasn't been a thing in a while.
Well, there was when I was looking to start a podcast.
Yeah, I know. Vine went out the way of flip cameras, sadly. Oh, I loved my flip camera. I blame Steve Saylor for that, but yeah, no, I loved that flip camera. Thought that was so good. What was your plan in getting your podcast off the ground?
Well, I would say the initial plan was I was like, I had to go learn. How am I going to make a website? How am I going to make a feed? Because I'm a tech savvy guy, but this was out of my wheelhouse. And I'm like, am I going to have a decent enough voice for it? Can I keep interest? And then I sort of just fell into it later on when Birdman moved to a closer city and we started hanging out. And he was like, hey, do you want to be on an episode? And I went, yeah, sure. And then, from appearing in an episode, it ends up being I basically run the back end of everything and then co-host. And while he's had times where he's had to take sabbaticals, I basically took over everything. And so I maybe approached it in a different way than a lot of other people, where I came in as a mid-season replacement. like some of the cast, just like the older brother on Happy Days, went upstairs, never to be found again. And then suddenly Cousin Alex is here taking over. So yeah, like this wasn't a case of me starting, a dead brand from scratch or anything, or starting from the beginning. Right. Just, we've had a revolving door of crew. It's just sort of been more stable in the last 3 or 4 years since I've been there than it had been, because you were part of that crew and you know how it was. Like, there was probably 3 or 4 distinct eras. You had 07 to 2010 or so. Then you had then from 2010 to
14 or 15.
It was pretty stable. Like, and then you had 15 to 17 was tumultuous with lots of people revolving in and out.
Yeah.
And then 17 onward, we've had a couple crew changes, but it's been pretty steady.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to happen. Not a lot of podcasts are around, 15 years.
Yeah, no, they're not. Like I said, I like doing the review shows because I like looking at it as a television show, an audio version of a television show, like I said earlier, where it has a finite end. But at the same time, I don't like we're recording this at the end of November 2021. It'll probably be out, depending on if I backdate it or not, or it might be out in the middle of December or whatever. Yeah. But the point is that I have episode 28, 29. This is episode 30 of Studio. I have 3 weeks of content that I need to finish, and then Steve and I just recorded episode 31 where we talked about Free Guy. So, we can cover whatever we want. Generally, I like to cover one thing on each episode. I don't like to do there are plenty, and I'm not trying to be, you know what I'm going to say, but you know how I'm going to say it. There are plenty of audio variety shows out there like This Week in Geek, that's the thing about Twig. Twig always had segments. You always had a different person doing a different segment, so you get multiple voices on one show, and I like that, and I think that's cool, both as a listener and a producer. But for this podcast and for other general podcasts that we do, I kind of like to keep it really simple and just do one thing at a time, because in my old age now, I'm very laser focused on, okay, you tell me I need to do this or watch this, I'm going to watch this and pay attention to nothing else so I can focus on what this is, so that way in an hour or whenever we can talk about it, kind of thing.
Oh yeah, and we've that's why we've had other topic shows, or we've had we're probably one of the few shows that never branched out to have multiple feeds for different shows. So This Week in Geek, while being obviously the flagship show that we do, is also the catch-all for every piece of programming. If it doesn't fit into the variety platform, then and it's like a sci-fi thing, we'll put out a sci-fi themed thing. So we do that. It's just, and I think some of it was laziness. We didn't want to have multiple feeds for everything, as I can imagine that creates a lot of headaches, especially before modern content management was, where you had to post everything manually. But still, I guess our mentality is, let's let's put it all under one banner. And, you might get 5 episodes in a week, and you can choose which ones you want to download or which ones you don't.
Yeah, exactly. Which do you prefer, audio or video podcasting as a fan and as a producer?
I like both. As far as producing, there's a lot more that would have to go into the video end of it. We've done a few clips here and there, some unboxing videos, nothing fancy. And the point being, we're not focused on that. We could eventually do that or move into streaming or something, but you got to get everybody on board. They all have to be okay with being on camera. Or you have to have a green screen. There's more equipment involved. It's a lot more expensive than just getting like a $50 or $100 mic, setting it up and EQing it the way you want to hear it. I do like video podcasts, but I tend to have them on in the background, like on my TV while I'm doing something else. I am much more of an audio guy where I'll have an ear, in listening to something, and the longer the better. If the show is 3 or 4 hours, great. I can break it up into segments. I know that Birdman had been really surprised when some of our shows started reaching an hour or an hour and a half. He's like, "That seems so long." I'm like, "Dude, you don't listen to a lot." He doesn't listen to a lot of podcasts, and I'm like, at the time, say what you will about Rogan now with some of his crazy batshit theory.
Right. Yeah.
He was averaging, this was a side gig because he made a lot of money doing everything else. His shows average 3 hours long and that's a single topic interview. And it sounds crazy until you realize that people aren't sitting for one session. Generally, unless they're doing something else, they'll have it in the background. And you can have shorter shows, and we'll have but we have a general rule. Unless there's some extenuating circumstances, the show shouldn't be less than 35 minutes because people want to have something on in the background they can do for the commute or they don't want to have to constantly be clicking to move on to another thing. They want to be able to listen to something longer.
Yeah. And that's what I love about Spotify specifically. In there, you can add to your episodes. So you have this one playlist of any podcast episode that you add to it, so that once you're done with whatever you're listening to, it automatically goes to the next one on your list kind of thing. And the funny thing is about the time length is one of my, along with Birdman and Snowball and everybody else, one of my earliest people that I paid attention to and gave me tips. I still have this is going to sound creepy, folks, but I've said this before. I still have all the emails this person originally sent to me, Michael Sims from earth-2.net. And his shows, some of them topic shows that he's done, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, because they're huge. Like going through the Marvel Cinematic Universe film by film. That if you do it all in one go, as a countdown or something, that's a huge long episode, and that does work. But yeah, generally you're right. 35 minutes to. I generally say 30 minutes to an hour and 30 minutes is a good enough kind of time that,
That's been our sweet spot. Is generally our main shows end up being about an hour and 20. But we're smart in that we record our reviews and some other segments, sometimes different times during the week. And it's sort of been a learned experience where you don't want to have to do it all at once because, as you know, an hour and a half of recording is actually more like 4 hours of work. Because at sort of a minimum. And even if you can edit really fast, it's the start and stops. You might have to take a break to use the washroom. You might have mic issues. You then, if you're editing something, you're adding music and whatever. It can end up being, basically add an extra hour for every hour you record. And then by the time you're done posting and scheduling it and getting it ready to promote it, that's an afternoon gone. So, and I can only imagine. I remember you guys, I don't know how you did it. Didn't you record like a 5-hour Star Wars podcast straight without a break?
That would be, I think that's movie we can review. It's MWire. It's episode 75. We actually did it, episode 75, part 1 and part 2, with the original trilogy and the at the
Special
time.
editions, or
No. The prequels and the original trilogy. But yeah, that was a 5-hour. Our countdowns are long.
but those are the countdowns. You can break them up. You can take a break if you need to. But
yeah,
I don't know how somebody can go like 5 hours. It's like at that point, are you muting yourself to go to the bathroom? because that's a long time. So
most of the time, I don't drink anything. Most of the time, yes, I will go to the bathroom before starting, and I might like right now. I have a cup of Diet Coke sitting here, but I won't drink it during the show because I know if I take a drink, 30 minutes, hour and 30 minutes, 2 hours and 30 minutes later, oh, somebody else talk. I gotta go. I'll be back, kind of thing. What kind of setup did you have when you started podcasting, and what do you use now?
When I started, I picked up a cheap, like $50 mixing board, one of those ones that has support for a single XLR mic. It's nothing great, but it had a battery backup built in because my thought was, oh, what if there's a not a surge, but what if maybe my USB port's not giving it enough power? I think I picked that up, and I picked up a condenser mic, and I ended up not really liking the sound because you need they don't tell you that you need to have a proper soundproof room, which is sort of a no-brainer, but not realizing that even if you're recording in like a bedroom and you've got stuff on the walls and that, you're going to hear every little thing, especially if you're in an apartment building like I am. If people are walking around, a condenser mic picks up pretty much everything. So I ended up switching to a decent, like not expensive, like a $50, $60 XLR to quarter jack. I think it's quarter jack. Yeah, the big old headphone plug. Dynamic mic with a windscreen on it, and I'm using for the most part an external Sound Blaster card. If that's a blast from the past, because it has a headphone amplifier, it has a proper full size mic input on it, and because it's a USB one, I can plug it into anything. It also works in my PlayStation if I want to do game streaming or something with it. The reason being, it's a high fidelity connection, and because it's a dynamic mic, I don't have to mess with the EQ settings. It's going to be a little warmer, the bass is going to be a little deeper, but I don't have to mess around and worry about noise reduction or anything like that. It's pretty much a plug and play system. Sure, I'd like to get a mixing board that has like soundboard stuff built in where I can just press buttons and have sound effects work. That's maybe down the line, but you work with what your means are as far as that's my equipment goes. Do you want to know the software that we're using, or
sure, whatever you want to say?
Sure. In general, when we record, because we've been recording remotely since the pandemic started, pretty much completely, we're using Zencaster for most of the recordings because it's a free option. There is a paid version to record lossless audio, but we're not doing that at the moment because you're only having one or two guests. It doesn't matter. But we do record that way because it gives us our separate audio streams that we can level up and alter as we need to. And as far as basic audio editing, we're just using Audacity for individual streams and then mixing them into a stereo stream. And then as far as piecing together the shows, we're using a few-year-old, because we're not paying for the Creative Cloud, the expensive stuff. We're using a few-year-old paid software of Audition that is still technically compatible with Windows 10 and 11. Still, it works a lot better, and it's sort of the step up from what Birdman used, which was Cool Edit Pro. He used that software for like 12 years after it stopped being supported until Windows 10 simply wouldn't work with it anymore. And then I'm like, dude, I even though this software we can buy is a few years old, Audition is Cool Edit. They just changed the name. So it was a bit of a transition for him, but it actually works. So we're not using crazy fancy software. We're using slightly older because some of the more advanced features are not necessary unless you're doing like full on broadcast radio audio, or you're doing stuff recording with the band. It does everything we need to. So it's a few step process. We could do the leveling and stuff within Audition. It's just sometimes simpler to use free Audacity.
Yeah,
because it's just easier. It honestly is.
And then there's always Levelator too.
Yeah, there's tons of things you can do. It's just that's what works for us.
Yeah, absolutely. If your headphones or microphone breaks down, do you buy the exact same setup, or do you use that chance to upgrade?
I always have a backup or two, and if worst case scenario, if I had to use earbuds just to record, I would. Microphone wise, I always keep an extra audio cable, and I did have my microphone die on me for the first time ever, where it was like the internals of the mic was like coming unsoldered or something from just use for multiple years. Yeah, like it wouldn't plug in. It was getting a buzz, and I'm like, that's not good. And I had to take a break for a week till I was able to order a new mic. And I just look for what has similar specs and I can get for $50 because I'm not doing anything fancy. Like if I had the money and I really, really wanted to, I could upgrade to something better. But the reality is it might sound better to me. There's a certain level though. There's a certain point where it doesn't matter, because even if I wanted to give it at a higher quality out to the masses, whatever podcasting platform you have is going to compress it more, and you can't control how somebody else is going to listen to it. And they're most likely either going to listen to it through the speaker in their device, which is not going to be the best quality, even in their car. Usually it'll be transcoding it to mono spread amongst the speakers, or they're going to be listening with very likely cheap, crappy headphones, because 90% of the headphones out there with iPods, even like a lot of the earbuds, the wireless ones, most people go with whatever's cheap, and that doesn't mean it's going to sound great. So all you got to do is find a quality. Like I found that $50 price point for the mic is fine, because even though I may have more expensive headphones, I know that 90% of people aren't going to listen to it that way. So it's just, I find headphone wise, if my headphones break down, I try to find something similar to the same, or I'll do a little bit of research to see how they sound, because I'm not like a big snob when it comes to the audio, especially for podcasts, but the headphones I use for podcasting are also headphones I use for, listening to music and everything else. So I would prefer them to be, better than like a Walmart brand. But I'm not like, I don't get suckered in by like Beats or you know what I mean? Like it's just the name. Yeah. I would rather go with, if I find a Chinese knockoff that turns out is made in the same factory but sounds the same, I'll get that. I don't care about the name on it. I care about the quality of it. So I'm using roughly like $70 headphones, but they sound like $150, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's like with me. Ever since Dustin Vancour pointed out the JVC headphones, they're these huge, giant can things, and this was like 2014, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, I'll buy those. Because one pair broke down on me, I've had two pairs, and as long as I can still find it, and as long as it, isn't, too, like, these are generally between $30 and $50 headphones. They're damn good because it's JVC, whether it's for music or for podcasting or for recording or listening or whatever. The sound
are they the RX 700s? Because I used those for like 10 years.
They are the HARX 700.
I used about two pairs of those. They were the best headphones you can get for under $100 for years.
Yep. Oh yeah. They're the only headphones that as long as I can still find them, they're the only ones I will ever buy. And thankfully, luckily, this second pair has not, what happened to the first pair was the coating around, like the ear cups that was disintegrating.
Same.
Part of the wire, like for the plug-in for the jack, the wire itself was fraying. Things like that.
I used them from like 2004 till 2014 or later, but I had two different pairs, and they were like 60 US. And honestly, like, it's not a plug for them, but like, I think they still, like, there's a reason they still make them and haven't replaced the model. It's the same with there's a Sony pair that you probably see them in whenever you see like studio recordings. I forget the name of them, but they have like a little blue label. They've been making those same headphones since like 1980, and there's a reason, because they're that good and they're not expensive.
No, not at all. I don't mind dropping, like you said, 30, 40, 50, 60 bucks on another pair of these kind of things. Did you think you'd be podcasting for as long as you have?
No, but at the same time, I didn't see any reason to stop. so it's just sort of a case of, I didn't know if it was going to work, if I was just going to be like an occasional contributor, and then it sort of became just the hobby that keeps moving.
Yep, absolutely. How have your podcasting goals changed since you started compared to now?
Not a whole heck of a ton. I mean, I wasn't going out like, I'm going to be famous for being on the internet. I don't care about that. I care, like, if one person listens to the show, if only one person ever did, and they were happy with what we did, it's an outlet. It's a creative outlet to get any stresses out and just sort of collaborate with your friends. So my goals are just to have it maintain its fun factor. If it's no longer fun, it's not a job. It's not my job. So if it no longer is fun and it becomes a chore to do, then I would get out of it. But I'm currently getting what I want out of it, which is it's my hobby. I'm not a bowler. I'm not doing anything else. This it's an excuse to hang out with friends and chat with people.
Yeah. And I've been doing this so long, and I look at it as, because I have pretty much nothing else at this point, I've always looked at it as, yes, it is my job as the co-creator of the Geekcast Radio Network, as the producer of X number of shows on the network. I wake up, maybe get some breakfast. I sit at the computer. Okay, what episodes do I have to edit? What episodes do I have to get out? And I'll spend, 4 or 5 hours from, like, say 6 a.m. to noon or whatever, just working on content that I want to create. Like, I just finished, before we started this recording, even though it's late, of course, by the time people hear this, it'll already be out. I just finished editing our first episode of So You Want to Be a Hawkeye, where Allison Richards and I talk about the first 2 episodes of Disney Plus's Hawkeye. So, I spent 2 or 3 hours on that, and that is an hour and 17 minutes, but I enjoyed what I was doing, because for me, it's always about where I can find a place in the conversation to insert if we're talking about our favorite scenes, as long as I have that audio, and as long as it's a break in the conversation, a natural break, I can say, okay, razor here, move this, put the clip in, do a little fade at the end, and then continue on with the show. I enjoy doing that most of the time.
Well, and I should say too, like, this is a case where you're in a similar boat as Birdman and I, where we're disabled persons, where we're not working a regular job, but you still want to maintain the work ethic of if you were. What I meant by it's not your job, it's like you're not paid for it. So when you do a job because you're paid for it, and even if you don't like it, sometimes you got to do it. This isn't a case with podcasting. If it's not fun, you find something else to do. But at the same time, it's that creative outlet. It's what keeps you going and keeps you doing something. Because otherwise, there is the stereotype where people are like, hey, you're disabled. You're just sitting on your ass doing nothing all day. It's like, no, it's not for a lack of trying in many cases. It's also, you know what I mean? Whereas the podcasting, it's like, okay, I can do something that, even if it's just for me, makes you feel like you've contributed something to the greater good or what's out there. Because nothing bad happens from you're podcasting in the sense that like it's not a bad habit to have. It's not if you're addicted to making content, it's not a bad habit to have. If
it's better than it is. Yeah, it's more healthy than any other addiction kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely. All right, it is time to surrender your podcast listenership. As a listener, what defines a good podcast to you?
As a listener, a couple things come to mind. One is consistency, and it's been a sticking point with some of the stuff we've done where the health and life can get in the way, where sometimes you'll miss, your self-imposed deadline or when you want things out. But as a listener, and you can probably agree to this because, like you said, you treat it like a TV show. People get disappointed when their show is preempted or moved. Mm-hmm. And there's something about waking up and going, okay, we set our stuff to come out 7 a.m. Eastern time. Mondays is sort of that's when our main show is out. Other shows we have Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, or Saturdays, and some can be flexible because they're not always a weekly show. Sometimes they won't even show up for a month if there isn't a topic for it. But the idea is whatever you consider your flagship or your main show, I prefer if I can know I go to bed on Sunday, by the time I wake up Monday, hey, that show is on my device and I'm ready to go. Something you can look forward to. It's something dependable because it fills the gaps. And you might not listen to it for a week or two, but knowing that it's there is one thing. Also, making a good podcast isn't just arguing for the sake of arguing on a topic or just gleefully agreeing with everything each other says. What makes a podcast is strong, distinct, honest personalities.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, sadly, not everybody is going to agree that Die Hard is not a goddamn Christmas movie.
Yeah, I mean, people can believe what they want. But what I mean is, like, I don't like, you don't want everybody to be a carbon copy or cookie cutter copy of each other. You also shouldn't, if you're funny, you're funny. You shouldn't try to force it. You shouldn't try to, put, like you should, if you might say something, like I've said things, especially at the beginning where, you'd be like, oh man, that's, you're trying to be an edgelord. It's like, no, it's just sort of my joking or who I was, but you shouldn't feel like you have to force it to get a rise out of the audience or listeners. Everything that you do should try to come across, if it's not, but you should at least fake it, try to come across as natural and as much of your real personality as possible, because people can tell. And nowadays, with every YouTuber out there and everybody being a content creator, you can tell who's fake and who's not.
Yep, absolutely. A couple months ago on the Pull Bag, I had one of my guests on there from the Radiant Black podcast, Bash, and we were talking before the show, and I said, okay, let's get the show on the road. So there's a few moments of silence, and all of a sudden, I roll into the Pull Bag opening. Hello and welcome to blah blah blah. And he, after I did all that, he's like, "Wow, it's amazing you can turn it on just like that." I said, "Yep, you gotta just go for it when you're ready to start a show."
Yeah. And turning it on is that's not to say that it's like that's a fake persona. You're just amplifying. No. You're amplifying yourself. You're not coming in here pretending to be somebody you're not.
Oh, no, not at all. It's more so versus, like, if you and I are having a personal conversation, I'm going to be talking like this, which I consider all of my podcast personal conversations. However, on the intros and the outros, I've always felt like I have to have that high energy, really, like, it's amazing sometimes how fast or slow I can get through the outros that I write out, because I put instead of having a pre-recorded clip of where everybody can contact us, I do all that myself, because I also include, like, the guests. Okay, if you have Twitter, okay, you have this, that, and the other thing. But between hello and welcome to, and all right, everybody, that's it for today. Thank you for listening, and blah, 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 blah. You'll hear this later, folks, when I go through the outro. You'll hear my voice change. But again, it's all about the conversation in the middle more so than the intro and outro are only there to get you to in and out of the show.
And Birdman does that, and that's his traditional radio background. With you have your announcer voice, keep him in, lock him in, excited. I could do that, but again, that would maybe, unless I'm really already hyped up, that would come across as disingenuous. So I come in it with like, hey, how's everybody doing?
Yeah,
it's just sort of my, like, not that I'm super zen or anything. It's just I can get excited. I can get excitable, and you've recorded with me where we've gotten really over the top. But I am not somebody who comes crashing in like that. That's not. So
and everybody has a different style. It's
and Birdman and I discussed it, and he's like, yeah, he goes, at first he's like, you want to do go over some intros or how to, and I said, dude, that's not, I'm just gonna wing it when I go in because that's just who I am. And he's like, good, because otherwise if we're the same sounding person, it defeats the purpose of the buddy cop team that we've got going.
I'm not sure I want to know who's Riggs and who's Murtaugh.
I'm both. I'm too old for this shit, and I'm crazy.
As a listener, what does a podcast have to draw you in? So that generally, I start at episode 1. I usually never start at the most recent because I want to hear how the show began and how it progressed. So when you first listen to a show, what does that show have to keep you coming back for more?
2 things. One, it has to have an introduction to the host and the general idea of what the show is going to be. Because if I am not, I want to find out in the first 5 minutes if I'm going to be interested. And the second thing that a show has to have is if it's one person, it's one thing. It's just maybe a topic show. But if it's going to have multiple hosts, the hosts have to have a different sounding voice. They can't sound very like, and it could be unfortunate if, let's say, the hosts are siblings or something, where they might have very similar sounding tones and cadence and everything. But I have to be able to be working on something and doing something in the background and not worry about whose voice is blending into who. Everybody has to have a distinctive sounding voice.
Yeah, absolutely. We kind of already talked about this one, so it's kind of already answered. As a listener, do you prefer short 30 minutes to an hour and 30-minute shows, or do you prefer longer podcast episodes, as in 2 hours or more?
I'll tell you this. Audio podcasts, a lot longer. Video podcasts or video shows like let's say video news shows, I prefer those to be at the 20 to 30 minute mark so I can wake up, have my coffee, and watch it as if I'm watching the news.
Absolutely.
So if it's a news-based show, whether it be technology, current events, sports, anything like that, I prefer those to be video and about 20 to 30 minutes. If it's any other podcast, like audio-wise, I'd like them to be between an hour and 2 hours long.
Very cool, very cool. As I just mentioned a minute ago, as a listener, do you start at the beginning of a podcast, the most recent episode, or do you jump around?
It's going to depend. Most of the time, I will start at the beginning, unless it's something like Twig is impossible. Like, I mean that for 2 reasons. One, it's like 700 or 800 episodes. But number 2, the real reason is it's impossible because the first wave of the shows aren't hosted anymore. We have them, but you quite literally, like, you could start by year if you wanted to. But our if it's a variety show like ours, you don't. For the main show, you can jump in anywhere because it's our news segments and reviews. We do our basic introductions. If I'm looking for a new show that I've never heard of before, I will try to jump at the beginning, especially if it's a themed fandom type show. If it's a variety news show, or for instance, let's say sports or wrestlers and different people, you can sometimes start if it's like a fan question and answer, like an Ask Me Anything show. You can sometimes jump into one of them, but I will generally try to start at the beginning, unless it's a show that's a few hundred episodes in, and it's not like, hey, this is episode 20 where we're talking about this episode of a TV show. Then obviously you start at the beginning. But if it's, a current affairs show, I don't need to know what they were talking about in 2015.
Yeah, true. The one thing I will say, not to necessarily bring it up here, but There is a show out there that I listen to from the beginning because it's an evolution of the hosts and what they're going through kind of thing. Like their wives were pregnant at the same time, or, something like that,
and you
where
can do
it's
that.
where it's like a weekly show where they talk about, just like Twig and GCRN, where we have like all things Transformers. We generally report on, various Transformers news and things like that and whatever, and we talk about what's going on in our lives. So that I followed from the beginning because that kind of is telling a story of you're a parent now, you're this, you're that, and you have to deal with all this life stuff.
It also helps if it's only, between 1 and 3 episodes per month. If you're doing 3 to 5 episodes a week, you can't really do that.
Oh, no. This is like weekly, and that's the other thing, and maybe I need to...
And if they're shorter. If they're like 30-minute shows, totally, you can do that. No problem.
Yeah, and maybe I need to add a question in here somewhere, but, that's the other thing is, how many episodes per week, per month, per whatever. Generally, we've always done either weekly content with, like you were saying about multiple shows and things like that. We would do weekly, like all things Transformers usually was every 2 weeks. It was fortnightly, or Movie Week in Review usually every week on Saturday kind of thing. Tooncast every week on a Wednesday, the pull bag. So that one specific show only has 1 episodes, but GCRN as a whole, I have always wanted to have, like you were saying earlier about consistent content, I've always wanted to have 7 days of content where a show, whatever show it is from whatever, like Boy Meets World, Transformers, He-Man, whatever it is, there's something for each day of the week.
Yeah, we're pretty much a minimum of 3 things per week. Mm-hmm. And there has been 9 episodes in a week one time where we had to get some things out and some syndicated stuff. So it was a couple episodes in a single day, which is pushing it because nobody has, like, unless you're a super fan where they're just listening to 1 or 2 entire networks and that's it. Like, you can't be expected. That's why, we sort of, how we've developed it is Monday is the flagship. Pretty much everybody that listens to our feed listens to that one. Mm-hmm. And then you can cherry pick what you'd like out, for the rest of the week. Yeah, absolutely. As a listener, how many hosts, and by hosts, I generally mean people. I don't mean like me as the main host. I mean anybody on the show. So how many hosts are too many on one episode? If they're all in the same segments, you mean? Like, so basically, if me, you, Birdman, Tristan, Blair, Dodds, if we have, the overall question is not necessarily saying about who's hosting the show. It's more about how many people are on the show at one. How many voices are on at one time? Yeah. Okay. For a simultaneous segment or show, you don't want more than 5 people. Unless there's a very specific need for it. Mm-hmm. Like we're recording live action role play games where you'll have, and we've got 4 players plus the host. So nobody's really speaking at the same time, but it can get chaotic if you have more than 3 people talking at the same time. And a way that we've found to mitigate that is our podcasts are in stereo. So recording all of our streams separately through Zencaster, it allows us, after we're done leveling them so we're all at the same volume, to have it. I generally have it where the host, if there's more than a few people, is centered so they come out of both ears at the same time. And then if you have 4 other people, then 2 people are a little more to the left and 2 people are a little more to the right in the stereo spacing, so that if people do speak up, it sounds more like you're sitting at a table with them. And you have less of a hard time, making voices blend together, because you remember like the days of Skype where it was all on one mono stream, and if you have 4 or 5 people talking, you have no idea what's happening. So I would say the ideal is 2 to 3 hosts. And then if you've got certain segments or reasons to have more, try to top it out at 5, unless there's a very specific reason to have more people. Yeah, specifically with various shows, depending on what, like with this show, or any of my question and answer shows, as long as we have,
even when I record on Skype, I make sure that no one is talking over each other, kind of thing. And that's kind of why I like doing the question and answer shows. Number one, as I said earlier, it gets a really good story from where the guest is coming from regarding podcasting or watching cartoons or reading comics, and you have a story time podcast where, as the host, I can just ask the questions, get the answers, and we have a conversation without running over each other and arguing and whatever.
Exactly. Otherwise, you have to do like with the top 100s, and kudos to everybody that's involved in those ones that you guys have done. I was a part of the wrestling one. There's a lot of people management you have to do. You have to work out ahead of time. Hey, here's sort of the order we're going to speak in, or please don't speak up even if you're excited until the host points at you or tells you it's your turn.
Yeah, absolutely. When do you stop listening to a podcast altogether?
If it jumps the shark. I will stop if it's happened sometimes where a show lost some of their hosts, or maybe didn't lose the host, but they changed their format. And I don't just mean that like, oh, hey, they've got different segments. I mean, like, they changed their entire topic. And it has happened sometimes. Or I'll drop it when, for instance, if I was following a fandom, like if I used to listen to Gate World, the Stargate podcast. Well, there was no more Stargate after 2011, so what was the point in listening to the podcast? I'm just going to rehash old episodes that at the time I had recently just watched. So every once in a while, I will go and I'll look and see if they're around, and I won't subscribe, but I'll download a single episode just to see what's new. But and that's happened. It's mostly with fandom-y type stuff, or like for instance, what I don't feel the need to remain subscribed to the Beast Unleashed podcast because I've listened to it once or twice.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think me being subscribed to a show that no longer gets another download from me is really going to help your numbers.
Well, it will, as long as the Beast Wars comic still goes on at IDW or wherever it's going to end up.
I was saying that, as
right.
an example,
yeah.
right?
No. And again, Beast Unleashed is one of those shows that was supposed to have a finite ending because we were covering Beast Wars and Beast Machines. And then, Steve did his Iacon Online Beast Wars thing, so we put that on there. And then IDW says, hey, we're going to do a Beast Wars comic. So then, obviously, we're going to put the Beast Wars comic on the Beast Wars show, kind of thing.
Or if a show, I will stop if, let's say, a show gets off to a good start and they have like, even if it's a monthly podcast, and they're like, hey, we've got 5 months in a row, and then now they're like, hey, we're taking a break, and then like 6 months go by, I'm not going to keep subscribed or listen back to it.
Yeah.
If you can't, if life gets in the way, obviously, you deal with your life stuff, but don't expect me to stick around.
Yeah, true. What podcasts are you currently listening to?
Right now, I've got a few of the GCRN stuff. Again, I have a backlog of a bunch of stuff I got to listen to because I've been busy. I'm subscribed to our own podcast so we can get at least one extra download. There's that 1 penny a month going into us from me at least. Actually, I'll pull out. I've got my iPod with me right now because I am somebody who still listens almost exclusively on an actual iPod Touch.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because I prefer to have my music device separate from my phone, because I'll listen so much that I don't want my battery to drain. But what do I have? If I go to my library, shows, and sometimes I'll skip. I am listening, or what I have subscribed to right now is This Week in Geek, GCRN, a bunch of those. We'll skip because those are shameless plugs. I listen to some wrestling ones, even though I'm not really watching wrestling anymore. I have the Jim Cornette stuff on there because regardless of if I'm watching wrestling or listening to it, he's just an interesting dude.
Yeah.
So I'll have some of those. What else do I have on here? This one's very infrequent, but it used to be a lot more frequent. Best episode ever, and the Marshall McLuhan Variety Hour, which are 2 podcasts recorded by a couple of hosts, Anthony Marco and Dave Broadbeck, both educators in Ontario. One lives in Hamilton, one lives in Sault Ste. Marie up north. Interesting fellows. Best episode ever is they go through they each pick an episode, or sorry, a TV show, and it has to have been made before 1990. Mm-hmm. And the goal is they try to pick a Canadian show that you could have only picked up here, or maybe sometimes in the States. And they sort of go through the history of that show and discuss how ridiculous sometimes it was. So they'll pick something really obscure that maybe had like 9 episodes, but they'll talk about it from like 1972. And their variety show is a sort of a random topic type show that I put on in the background. And I've been listening to them, actually going back to my original. They're probably one of the first podcasts I listened to back in like 07 or 08. And they might go like 2 or 3 months without a show, but because it's one of the first shows I ever listened to, I just leave it on the background, and it's like, oh, there's a new episode today. And then I'll listen to it that way. I listened to the weekly show, the RPG Cast from RPGgamer.com. And that's another earlier one that has been out for like 10 years or more. And a lot of it's the hosts just talking to each other, but also news about video games and role-playing games in particular. I have a friend and former co-worker runs his own podcast called Pixel Opinions, which is him and his friends sitting around talking about games and gaming news. And it's sort of an idea to bounce off of when I'm doing my own shows. If I miss a news article online, I can always listen to theirs. They do a show that comes out Sundays or Mondays. Obviously, Altered Geek, all things Transformers, yada. And one that is probably the most unique one I have, that it's only a monthly show, and it's the Retro Gaming Roundup. I've been listening to them for probably 10 years now. And theirs is like a 5 or 6 hour podcast. So they record multiple segments on many different topics. It could be arcade repair, it could be top 10s, that sort of stuff. And it's a co-UK-US production. I think Mr. Neil had one of the hosts on to talk about his book one time on his podcast. And it's the only one I have that's a monthly show that, again, is like 6 hours. So, and that's when I told Mike about that. And Birdman's like, what? That's crazy. I'm like, dude, they only release a show once a month. So, every week they're recording maybe an hour's worth of content, and then they throw it all together in one big show. So, and they date back, like, yes, it's 10 years old, but like they go back so far that, remember, bandwidth was so small. They had a version that you could download on their website that was like 8 kilobits per second for truck drivers to listen over CB radio. Right. So, and there's what else? I've gone through phases of having other things on there. Some of the podcasts that I've listened to in the past, like I'm drawing a blank on the names, but they do date back to the 90s, even if they have a modern format now. So like they were originally like Real Media players or like QuickTime. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's sort of what I've got on the go right now. I try to keep less than 10 feeds active because that will end up being roughly 12 to 15 shows a week. So I'm guessing it's like 20 hours roughly on average of a week that I'll have going on in the background.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. All right, folks, that's the first 15 questions. We're going to take a quick break, come back after this for the rest of the show. We'll be back in a moment.
Hello, geeks and geekettes! Looking for a podcast that covers a vast array of topics? Then check out Altered Geek Unleashed, where we discuss our thoughts on this week's geeky news, tech, gaming, television shows, movies, cartoons, comics, and more. So, get altered, get geeky with the Altered Geeks, every Friday on the Geekcast Radio Network.
Welcome to my throne room, Future Tales. The Beast Unleashed podcast is over, not gone. You can hear more of this great podcast, discussing all the episodes of Beast Wars and Beast Machines on GeekCastRadio.com. We include voice actor and writer interviews with stellar hosting by Steve, Mike, and Michael. Head on over to iTunes, or the net, or else I will send you my vehicles to extract your spark and destroy you. Yes.
What was that universal greeting again? Never mind, I remember. Ba weep grana, weep nitty bong.
Hey guys, it's Rodimus Primal, and be sure to check out my YouTube channel. Join me as I have Transformers discussions, retrospectives, toy reviews, and more. You can also follow me on Twitter at Rodimus Primal, as well as Facebook and Instagram at Rodimus Primal Show. Transform and roll out, and be sure to check out my content till all are one.
Last big party of the summer, folks. Let's go out with a bang.
Discover a world of vintage and modern toys that's more than meets the eye with the Triple Takeover Toycast.
Hosted by toy writers and photographers Toybox Soapbox, 6O, and TF Square 1, this informal and chilled out series of discussions cover everything from vintage Transformers to Mask, Diaclone, Microman, and more, be it nostalgic or current.
Whether you're a seasoned collector or a casual robot enthusiast, all are welcome.
Triple Takeover Toycast.
On the Simplistic Reviews podcast, we talk movies. We talk TV. We talk...
Hello, Julie, what the heck are you doing?
Trying to make our spots sound more exciting by adding explosions.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could have got the point across with sound effects, not the real thing.
Download the show on iTunes or at simplisticreviews.blogspot.com.
I'm sure your insurance company will cover that.
No, they won't.
No, they probably won't.
All right, we are back inside Studio 2009 with Alex Ricci's podcast Approach. It's time to talk about your podcast production. As a producer, do you find yourself listening to podcasts less and less?
No, I'm actually probably listening more.
Interesting.
There are weeks where I won't listen to quite as many because I'm too busy. But I would say I'm listening to shows more often just to hear, what's the current trend. And, sometimes I'm like, ew, I don't like that. But for the most part, I think I'm probably listening a little less than I was when I was not recording anything. I probably had maybe 2 or 3 more shows I was listening to, but I maybe find that I don't listen. I might skip a random episode here or there, but I'm listening to roughly the same as I was 5 years ago.
Yeah, it depends on what my workload is. If right now I'm backlogged, but I wake up, I roll over, I look at my phone, and I open up Spotify, and a new episode of this has appeared for streaming or whatever. And that's the other thing. And I need to probably edit the questions here. I'm more about streaming the episodes than I am about downloading them. I know that's probably taking away from the pennies that we could be getting kind of thing, but
not particularly, but I also prefer to download. I'm in the basement. Like, my apartment is a 4-story building, and I'm in the basement. It's an older building. So even with drilling holes through the walls to get the Wi-Fi repeaters in there, I don't want any interruptions. So I have it set to auto download pretty much everything I listen to. I will still stream video shows, obviously, but I also tend to listen before I go to bed. So I might be in bed with it's all dark and I'm just listening with a low volume before I really have my brain turn off to fall asleep. So I don't want to be listening to something and then have it cut out or jump to something else on the stream. I like to have it so that when the episode ends, it just ends and I pass out.
Yep, absolutely. As a producer, are you a podcast planner or are you throwing stuff at the mic to see what sticks?
The planner. Because there has to be some structure to the chaos. Birdman is good at planning big ideas, but it's getting a solid schedule down because I was always the procrastinator growing up, and if I don't have, it doesn't have to be rigid, but if I don't have a general plan down and be like, hey, we will get overwhelmed. And that's mostly because since I joined, we did shift a lot of our focus from weekly or monthly topic shows where you don't really have to plan as long as you already know what you're doing, or unless you have to do research by watching something, to having, Birdman would do maybe 4 or 5 game or movie reviews in a month.
Right.
We've gone to do 200 to 300 a year. Jeez. So about 50% of our content is product reviews, whether it be movie, game, whatever it is. So, and that just, it's slowly ramped up from 2017, 2018, and so on, especially with the pandemic. You weren't going out. There wasn't much to do. So if a company's like, hey, here's a code to check out this movie or check out this game, talk about it. So if you don't, and there's different embargo dates and for anybody that doesn't know, an embargo date is just simply you're given the ability to view something early or given a promo copy of it. And there will be a date saying, hey, you can't discuss this till after this because it's legally binding. You could potentially, at best, they would just drop you as a client and not talk to you. And it's not about giving good reviews. They can you have to be impartial. And if it's a bad game or movie, you tell them it's bad. What it means is they're not paying for your good review. They're just saying, hey, we'll drop you and not talk to you anymore because you broke the street date. Or worst case scenario, and I've seen some, and I can say very quickly that I reviewed the game Control, and when that came out, was it 2 summers ago, 3 summers ago, something? I had to print a contract, sign a legal document, fax it back to them, that if I broke street date, they would hold me financially accountable, meaning they could sue me for millions of dollars for talking about the game before I was supposed to. And that can happen, and it has happened to people before. So because of that, I've got to keep a schedule. I got to keep a spreadsheet of, hey, here's what we've received. Here's what we're reviewing. We only have 2 to 3 slots to put it in this week. And here's the date that they want. Not that they want the review up. Here's the date the review can go out. So if I don't micromanage somewhat the schedule and be the order to the chaos, we end up in situations where it's happened, where it's like, oh, we've got like 25 things to talk about this week. And that seems ridiculous. And it's also not fair to the people that gave us stuff if we only give them a couple minutes. So it's a learning process. But ideally, I would love to have it, not be automated, but have it be second nature to us that we just know what our schedule is. And that's maybe a goal for next year, it's always, how can I streamline things to make it easier on our scheduling?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the way it should be. And that's the way I look at our scheduling, and my scheduling is, I have no life. I can make whatever work. If you sit there and say you have this day, and this day from this time, and this time, okay, well, let's agree on a day, agree on a time, and let's go get it done.
Recording is the fun part. The part that does feel like work is not even so much the scheduling. Sure, you got to wrangle people. It's the getting the content prepared and promoted. Good Lord, I didn't realize how boring that part was and how time consuming it was till you had to edit like 10 shows in a row.
Yeah, promotion I don't mind.
It's the busy work of getting the episode. The editing is fun. It's getting the episode uploaded, having your descriptions, your pages prepared, having it ready to go, and wording it the right way you want to word it, and then just hoping people connect to it and listen to it.
One of the things for me when I'm doing something like the pull bag or whatever, where we're reviewing a trade paperback or something, like usually with the comic show, with the pull bag, I will have series, or like my buddy Joe and I have reviewed all 100 issues of the IDW TMNT series. So generally, because it's just Joe and I on that series, the description I can just have, in Microsoft Word or whatever. And if I have to change it, like if I have to change the episode number, or if I have to change this or change, that's easy. That's nothing. But it's like sometimes coming up, like if you have a new show, coming up with a general description for the new show, unless your creative juices are flowing, you're going to burn out, because you're going to be like, what do I say about or for me, like sometimes with all things Transformers, even though I listen to every second of audio and editing, by the time I get to the point of writing out a description, what the hell did we talk about in that episode? Fuck, I don't remember. What the, so that's
or again, getting into it. If you think that, hey, it's fun to be a YouTuber and review products and that, guess what? Every product that you review, it's either expected implicitly or explicitly, or just good etiquette. You are going to be searching down a link to send people to find that. You're going to have to get a description for it. Sometimes you'll have to have pictures. And let's say you'd review 2 or 3 things in a show. That means every show you have to make a custom. You can have a template to work with, but you have to make a custom description, custom promotion, custom tweets, custom tags. And if you're, it's all fun and games. I got free stuff to work with. It's free is never really free. There's no such thing as a truly free lunch. There's always something for it. Yeah. So I would say the easiest thing would be if you are somebody who doesn't care about the audio and you think that audio podcasts are easier to do. There's more work because there's more written stuff you got to do. If you're somebody who just wants to get your content out in the world, honestly, YouTube, because you can make a generic thing you want to say, especially if you're just talking random shit and you want to make it like a vlog series. You can still do that to dip your feet in, but if you want to make yourself come across as professional, you're going to have to make a whole bunch of templates just for every scenario you could think of. And then remember, anytime you do a themed episode or if it's a Halloween episode or a holiday episode, you're not going to be using that same generic thing unless you don't want to come across as being lazy. Yeah, no. Even if it is monotonous work, like it is kind of boring doing that background stuff, or we're working on the websites, getting things posted. Good God, I don't know how many times I've posted something and then had to go back and go, crap, I got the date wrong or I got this wrong. It's like, why? It's like because I copied and pasted a previous one and then forgot to alter one little thing, and then it makes me look stupid.
Or when people have to, like, I don't. That's all Steve's thing sometimes with the back end. Like with the RSS feeds and the XL feeds and whatever feeds, I know a lot of people, like, if they accidentally put an and sign instead of writing out and in a feed thing, it fucks it up and the episode won't come out, kind of thing. And it's like, what the hell? Oh, I put an and sign in there. That's
I've had that. Or worst thing I've done is, speaking of embargoes from before, is I had I used one wrong wording and had to go back and alter it and go to every platform that it was available on, make an alteration because I used the word review when I was supposed to use the word impression. Even if technically they were the same thing, a review in the contract implied that this was the finished product, and the finished product was going to include a day one patch. So I was like, oh shit. And then you got to go in, you got to make a tweet about, hey, altered this, because anybody that's already received it has received it with the wrong wording. Yeah. And then so it's like you can put a Band-Aid on it, but it doesn't always fix it. So you have to be diligent.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Very, very diligent. Or there are times where, like, Steve doesn't generally like in the back end, in the background, as long as we have them listed somewhere, episode numbers are fine, but he has never liked episode numbers in titles, where I'm like, I need an episode number in the title so I know exactly where I am in that show as far as a producer kind of thing. And if you're writing out, like, for the top 100 Transformers characters countdown, I wrote out 6 descriptions. And I screwed up the episode numbering in the descriptions because I'm like, wait, what number is this? Oh, this is supposed to be this. So that way you have to go back. It's crazy.
I've made that mistake. I prefer the numbering system, or I did, until I realized that we're putting out so many that I sat back and went, wait a minute, are we going to scare people off? If we put in our number, it's like, oh, this is This Week in Geek episode 854. Are they just going to go, oh, that's too far in, I don't want to listen to it?
I don't think so. If you
I was like, it could potentially do that, but also, in our case, is there a reason to number that except when it's special occasions, like when we hit episode 1,000 or something? Like we already had, like, I think, was it last year, 900 or 1,000 total things we had produced or been a part of or anything syndicated. So we'll do anniversary shows and number it that way, but then I screwed up the numbering on a couple episodes and put them in the wrong order when we did JT from Saskatoon's show with Birdman, the Sunday Funnies, which is the comic book show, and then Aaron Pollier's show, the Earth versus Soup. I put a couple out of order by accident of how it was uploaded. Like, I upload them in the right order, but then how it appeared in our content manager was wrong. So I put the wrong description in, and I was like, all right, screw it. Most of these are evergreen episodes in that they're not serialized in a show format that each one is carrying forward, and they're sort of on their own. So I just sort of did a break point about a month and a half ago where I stopped numbering them, even though internally we have them numbered, so I know where they are.
Yeah. As a producer, are you a one-man show kind of host, or do you prefer working with co-hosts?
I prefer not having to do everything myself. I can, and I will, and I know it'll get done, but I find I prefer the collaboration in the recording aspect of it, and how our dynamic works for the most part when everything's rolling full steam ahead is we record together as a group. I then take the individual audio streams, do some audio leveling. I do the initial stereo mix of our vocals. Birdman will then do the editing, even though we both can, but just to divvy up the work. He will do the editing where he's adding music, segment titles, any pre-recorded reviews that we recorded on our own, and place them all together, and he will do the export. I do a quick listen over if there's anything that needs to be done, and then I handle the upload and the show posting, and he handles promotion after it's out, because how our social media was built and how it evolved over the years, it pretty much was, we had social channels for the site and for the shows, but Birdman built the entire social network around himself as the personality. So he currently has 4 to 5 times the followers on his personal accounts, which is what he used to manage all of the all of the posts. Everything before was done through him directly, and then it would sort of be retweeted by the main sites. So now we do it the other way. We do it the way it's kind of supposed to be, which is the show and the website post everything, and then he will retweet it and bring his individual followers that are in there. The hardest part has been getting people to move from it being, This Week in Geeks promotion being entirely the Birdman show to being the show itself.
The show,
It's hard to get, in an ideal world, everybody that follows him would now be following the show as well, but it's only about a third.
Yeah. How do you go about finding your co-hosts?
Who's willing and doesn't sound like a moron?
That's pretty. I'm sorry, I can't be on this podcast this week because I sound like a one-legged moron.
Well, there's been there's been some people where you're like, that's not going to work. You find people that are willing, and you get people. Sometimes you think they're a good fit, but they're not consistent. You got. How we go about it now is we find people that we've come to the conclusion that Birdman and I are the full-time hosts. That's just pretty much how it's going to be until one of us can't do it or has no ability to do it. Then that's it. So with your 2 full-time hosts, we then have anybody else. We've got a slew of 3 or 4 people that are, I would say, regular contributors and co-hosts on specific shows, but they're part-time in that they've got other things going on, and they come on when there's a topic to talk about. And because going into it with an expectation of getting everybody to sit down, we tried it, and even with a 4 and 3 man booth, sort of, it became too much. And at the same time, like you were a regular host as well, especially during the rough years.
2011 to 2014 or 2015, I think. Yeah.
And the problem, like we discussed it, like we could have you on regularly all the time, except you got other stuff to do too with your show. We decided we got to have a consistent couple regular hosts that we're not putting a burden on other people to expect them to show up for a weekly show. So instead, we'll do shows like we'll have our Loose Cannon show, which is our B movie show that we do with Aaron Pollier. We will sometimes record, and those are usually 45 minutes to an hour. We'll record 2 episodes, or maybe if it's a shorter one, 3 with him in a row in one day, one evening, and then that can spread out over the course of a month and a half because he's got a full-time job. He's got other things to worry about.
Right.
And, in some cases, if we can't get the extra co-host, then it's Birdman and I doing it together or solo. And generally, if somebody wants to join us as a regular host, all we ask, and I mean, we're guilty of sometimes missing it too, is can you commit to 1 episode a month? Can you do like a Sunday Funnies? And that's been mostly on us not having trouble scheduling and Birdman not feeling well or having other commitments. But generally the goal, we talked to JT, was JT, we can't guarantee more than 1 a month, but can you commit to 1 a month?
Yeah.
And if we do more, great. If we don't, whatever. So if somebody can dedicate 2 hours of their time, we'll have you on as a contributor, and then eventually, if you're consistent, then obviously you're part of the team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for me, it's like scheduling. Like we were talking earlier about being planners versus just throwing stuff at the wall. I try, other than all things Transformers and some of that news stuff that Steve and I do, I try to avoid the evergreen content so much because, like you said earlier, bing, bing, bing has to be done. If you're releasing something that needs to be released in a timely manner of, oh my God, if it's not out, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, that's just too much goddamn stress. I don't need that. I would rather just sit back and talk about a show from 40 years ago or 30 years ago or 20 years ago and have a fun time and have a good recording versus having to worry about when the hell the damn show's out kind of thing. As a producer, well, we talked about this before too. Do you feel you need... Oh, wait. Okay, yeah. Do you feel you need a mixing board and all the fancy stuff that would be in a radio station, or are you good with a great microphone and headphone setup?
It would be nice, but it's not necessary. I think if you're somebody who thinks it's absolutely necessary, you might want to reevaluate how honestly, how good of a host you are.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a crutch that you need and you think you have to have it, reevaluate it. It's a nice, in our case, it's a nice to have because it would save some time with editing. I'd also like to be able to beep somebody if I want to, or have a few funny things. Like we'll put bloopers in the beginning and end, but it would be nice to have some of those classic bloopers that if somebody messes up, we can just press a button and have it do it. So as a time saver, great, but it's not necessary.
Yeah. Oh boy, classic bloopers. I have a whole folder of them.
Good.
I remember the one, I don't remember what the hell he was watching, but I have a clip of Birdman saying, he's punching himself or whatever it is. And
there's a few that I think we got recorded somewhere where I think we were recording with you in the incarnation where I had joined Nerd News.
Yep.
And Blair set the house on fire.
Yeah.
She had a little spill of grease and there was like apparently 10-inch flames.
Oh boy, that was a hot time in the old Canadian town tonight.
Yep.
How much, as a producer, how much time do you put into the editing of the show?
If it's a show where I'm the only host, unless there's a major problem, 15 minutes. For a basic like review show or a topic show, 15 to 20-ish. for anything that requires a lot of sound effects to be put in, or for like we have like gift guides or certain special topic shows, that about an hour for an individual episode. The easiest ones are commentaries, because when we do a commentary, we throw an intro on, and then we throw our extra on it, and it's quite literally a 30-second affair.
Yeah, that's the same thing with me with commentaries. I'll throw the intro, the outro, and then generally between like the beginning of the show, like, hi, this is this, and we're going to be doing this, and right after this, you're going to get our countdown. So I'll put like, for example, Back to the Future. You're going to see some serious, when this baby hits 88 miles per hour, I'll put that clip from Doc Brown in, and then we'll come back and say, okay, 3, 2, 1, start. And then you just go until the end of the show, and then you put the outro on and be done. As a producer, do you prefer in-person recordings or over the internet recordings via Skype, Zencaster, etc.?
I would normally say, okay, if you have a proper high-end mixing board, in person can be great. It is a logistical nightmare right now. And if you've got any special needs or you have to, like Birdman, how he records, we're stuck in the room we're in, acoustics, be damned. So anything that would normally sound like acoustically, if there's trouble on his end, if you're recording in person with him, well, you're going to have that same issue too. And that can happen where he records, you'll have people like in motorcycles drive by really loudly. And it's like, well, we're leaving that in because I'm not starting over again.
No.
I would say that one of the godsends of recording online and making me lean towards this, even if the audio quality was technically more compressed, is the ability, without any specialized hardware, to record individual audio streams, making editing and leveling so much easier. Because recording in person, unless you've got fancy equipment, you're generally recording on the same audio track. And at that point, yes, it's easy in that it's all done on one track, but it also means if one person is louder than the other and you don't catch it when you're doing your mic setup, or you move the position of where your mic is while you're talking, you're going to have one person way louder than the other, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Nope. We did talk about this one earlier. Do you prefer, as a listener and a producer, do you prefer one feed have everything, or should each type of show have its own feed?
It's a flip a coin thing with me. I prefer, for my own use, to have it all in one. But I do see the merit in having multiples. You just need to be able to come by it once you're subscribed, you're subscribed. It's just, you want to make it very easy to come across.
Absolutely. How do you use social media to promote your podcast?
We will post. It's supposed to be automated, but right now I think some of the APIs are broken on our hosting end. But we use Facebook and Twitter for 99% of it. We have Instagram, but I mean, I don't get it. I also like it's funny. There's other platforms like TikTok you could be using, or other social media. It's just, I'm old, and not so much that I don't understand it, but I don't think people that would want to listen to us are looking to find us through those. So it's Twitter and Facebook, and then word of mouth that way. We could, we've got a Discord, but it's mostly used just for us to record. It's not like a public forum or anything. But yeah, we're sort of going by those two because those are the easiest to integrate with. And then we have our website, obviously. And if you search out This Week in Geek, you'll probably find it through search engine optimization, all that junk.
Oh boy, yeah. And again, because I wanted to do different shows, that's why I like the individual, because the audience for Transformers Generation 1, if you've got a true quote-unquote G1er that only wants G1 and doesn't give a shit about Beast Wars, well,
they can eat a bag of dicks. I'm sorry. Get over yourself.
No. I know, but
get over yourself. You can skip an episode, or you know what? You can be nice to the people that record you and let it at least download and then delete it. Because then at least you're helping support them on their stream, because you don't know how much more work you're making for those guys.
And again, I started out with doing review shows of, again, this is why I look at audio podcasting as an audio television show, because again, you take the US Generation 1 Transformers cartoon, 98 episodes. At the time, I fitted into 24 podcasts or so. We did do a couple supplementals that weren't anything to do with.
It came to my head. Sorry for interrupting. I'm thinking of your podcast commercial. You should be listening to my TFGM podcast, my first podcast.
Yeah.
How many times did I hear that? Tells you how much of a fan I was. I listened to everything. So yes, moving on. Just had a non-flashback. That's all. Sorry.
That's the thing. You get into this and you get 13, 14 years into it, and like I don't even know. I know as of our 9-year anniversary. 9-year anniversary, I had just over 2,000 podcasts that I have released. And since then, I want to say I'm close to 3,000 now, because again, as I said at the beginning of this, I have no life. Podcasting is my life. Whether I'm recording, whether I'm editing, even though sometimes with the editing, it's like, oh God, because I want to make sure everything is right. I can't just do the 15-minute check, because if something is like, say for example, like you were saying earlier, if a train comes through or whatever comes through, usually lately I'll just say, like if it's Transformers, there's Astro Train, he's making his nightly run or something like that, and that's fine. But if like there's a break, like I usually put breaks in my shows, like I did earlier with this. Like I'm going to need to listen to this to make sure at the end of question 15, I cut here, and I can put in like a Twig commercial or whatever thing I'm going to put in there, kind of thing. So yeah, what is your favorite topic to discuss on a podcast?
Religion and politics and why you're all wrong. No. My favorite topic, I would say something safe but fun to talk about is entertainment news, like gaming and TV show hobbies. The standard sort of fare. I would. It's weird. Like I would. There's certain things I would love to talk about that I know nobody else would, so I don't bother. I would be that guy that's like, hey, let's talk about how stupid some of these shows were in like 1993. Like that's why I listen to that Best Episode Ever show, is because it sort of goes into that. Only difference being me being younger, I'm thinking of things from the 90s mostly. Favorite things to talk about. The segment we have, like we do our entertainment news or geek news, it's the weird news stuff, and we usually have a shorter segment for it because they're usually not quite as long to talk about. But it's I like searching the internet for what happened this week that is truly strange or hilariously bizarre. I like talking about those sorts of things because you can really get into it. And you might have to tone yourself down a little bit because you don't want to get too crass with what you're discussing in it. But sometimes, just how ridiculous life can be is interesting.
Absolutely. If you've done any interviews with famous people, which was your favorite?
A lot of the interviews we've done, I was running the background, like either monitoring the audio feeds to make sure nobody dropped out, or maybe did a bit of an interview ahead of time, or did the pre-interview stuff. I can tell you a couple. I'll tell you one that was fun that I don't think I got to be a part of directly ahead of time, but we ended up talking a bit before and a bit after. And that was last year, the year before, that Birdman interviewed Ed the Sock, which was the stand-up comedian character that I think like Triumph the Insult Comic Dog was a copycat of.
Right. Yeah.
It's sort of a very iconic to the Canadian experience in the 90s, in particular on much music and city TV, and just sort of a very, very large part of pop culture for anybody that's currently between the ages of like 25 and 45. And there's probably been a few others in there that were interesting. I'll tell you one that I was disappointing because it didn't work out because of timing constraints. Is I was originally last spring or summer, I was going to be interviewing Seth Green.
Oh wow!
Yeah, when Robot Chicken was coming back, and then fairly few days beforehand, scheduling conflicts came up, and I was going to be interviewing his co-creator instead, which was still going to be awesome, but it was a bit disappointing. And then we go to do the interview, and we're there. I'm with his PR team, and we're waiting, and he couldn't make it.
Oh no!
And then they were like, maybe we can reschedule for another time, and I'm like, maybe, but this kind of sucks. So, and that was one of the things where we learned from that. Like, we didn't really say what we were going to be doing, but we did learn from it. They like, hey, we shouldn't announce interviews before. I mean, luckily we didn't, but we shouldn't announce who we're going to interview beforehand because you don't know who's going to be able to make it and who's not. And we were also supposed to interview. I don't think we actually got around to doing it because we had some trouble. Maybe we did. We were going to interview like the head. The CEO of the Asylum, which is that company that makes all the mockbuster movies like Sharknado.
Right. Yeah.
So and there's been a few, but yeah, Seth Green was going to be interesting, and that would have been super fun. But again, schedules just didn't work out. They only have a finite amount of slots for that. So in the future, I'd like to interview more people. And there's been more opportunities pop up with other people from like CW shows, and that it's just again timing wise hasn't always lined up. Yeah. I wouldn't be overly nervous interviewing somebody unless there's reason to be. You just want to make sure you're cognizant of their time and not want to. You don't want to come across as a complete goof or a complete fanboy or anything. But I've listened in, like I said, on a lot of the interviews and before and after talked with the people, and that's been pretty fun. Realizing that most of the people we've interviewed have been the same on mic as they were, live on air as they were when they're not on air. Because it would be very disappointing if we did go to interview somebody and we found out they were complete dicks before they went on the air. Because I don't know with my personality if I could keep their secret that they're secretly assholes. But yeah, so that's just there's a little behind the scenes story for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the thing with interviews, especially with famous people, with voice actors, with whomever, cosplayers, musicians, whatever, like especially voice actors, you hear someone like...
This is Kevin Conroy, and I am the goddamn Batman.
Kevin Conroy or Mark Hamill or Tara Strong, I remember when we interviewed Jason Marsden and Josh Keaton. Josh Keaton does a lot of voice acting stuff, and he puts on a voice for certain roles. And, certain people, it's like, oh, this is what you like. You take Stan Bush. Okay, I've interviewed, Stan Bush is the single most interviewed person on the Geekcast Radio Network.
Well, he's basically Uncle Stan for you now.
Essentially, yes. But you listen to his music and you listen to his voice, and you assume, oh yes, his voice is going to sound similar to this, and you pick up the line with him, and it's like, oh, you sound like that. Just the sound of his voice, you sound like that, or whatever kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
Like with Larry Kinney, you hear Lion-O or Sonny the Cocoa Puff Bird in your head, and then he just sounds the way he sounds, kind of thing, and whatever. Is there or was there ever a moment when you were completely done with podcasting?
I've gotten to the point a couple times in the last few years where I was like, hey, let's get some stuff prepared, or can I get some stuff scheduled so that, because me handling the back end has also meant that, like, right now nobody else is posting to the site, and that's by design until we got everything streamlined the way we wanted. And we wanted to make sure that from a security standpoint that we knew exactly who's posting what at whenever. I have to make some extra users and stuff. There's some work I got to do anyway. So even if I'm not recording, I'm the one that has to post everything right now. And the goal is over the Christmas break, when we're taking about a month off, we're going to have stuff pre-scheduled, and I will then go in and make some best practice like video tutorials and some PDFs to show how our process is, so anybody else can replicate it in case, God forbid, I got sick and couldn't do it anymore or something. But the idea is, I've had a few times now where I've I need a couple weeks off, and it doesn't. It's because it's too much. Like I'm going to catch up on my stuff so that I'm completely caught up. And pardon me, but I don't want to talk to y'all motherfuckers for 2 weeks. I'll chat with you online. I'll send you text messages or whatever need be. If you need an emergency help, if you need me to come on to help you, if there's a real problem with your recording or something, fine, contact me. But y'all dicks F off. I'm done. I need a mental break. And even if you're like, well, you're only recording a couple times a week. Yeah, but it's never off.
Yeah.
So every once in a while, I'm like, you know what? I would like a couple weeks, and that's what our plan is to, because since I've started, I have never actually had a week off where I didn't do anything for the site.
Yeah.
So I would, and as much as it's not to sound ungrateful, because it's I can do this if I want to or not, but even when I was on break, I was still doing all the posting. So I would like to have it set up so that when we go for our Christmas break and we're off for 4 weeks, that maybe we'll come back to record one thing together while we're on break. But I would love it so that for 3 or 4 weeks, we have content coming out. It's already auto promoted. But I just quite simply don't have to do anything. And so, I mean, I've never come to the point where I'm like, I don't want to do it at all. But I have come to the point where 2 times a year, I would like a few weeks off.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where you have to take a break, because if you don't, you're going to suffer from burnout, and you're going to basically want to burn the whole house down, kind of thing.
Pretty much.
And everybody has had this. I've had it. Steve Megatron has had it. I'm sure Birdman.
Oh, he's had them where he's had a lot going on, and then I've basically taken over, which I'm glad to do. So he's my friend. At the same time, we don't want to enter a situation where we would both we're like, hey, our minds are gone. We're gonna drive a screwdriver into the side of our head if we record anymore. We don't want to have a situation where neither of us want to do it, and then we have weeks where nothing happens, because that is, breaking my cardinal rule of consistency.
Yep. And the thing of it is for me, and I've said this since episode 0 of TFG1, I will work my ass off from New Year's Day to Halloween. Whatever we can get done in those 9-10 months, whatever, once Thanksgiving and Christmas come around, I want to cut it back to half of that. If we have, at least 1 or 2, if we do a Christmas episode on Geekcast Radio, we recently just did the Thanksgiving episode, because sadly my wife passed away and Karen passed away, and we were talking, I was talking about reflecting on that and everything else. So do holiday episodes, do your holiday gift guide, whatever, as long as you don't have any, with holiday gift guide, as long as you don't have any products that you're waiting on, sometimes certain companies, I'm not saying this is going to happen anytime soon, because they just released the 6 and 6 Pro, but let's say Google Pixel 7 and 7 Pro are coming out December 22nd, but you're already ready right after Thanksgiving to do your holiday gift guide and get it produced and recorded and whatever, you're going to miss out on that one thing kind of thing. And that's why the whole evergreen content, like, it's a nightmare. But yeah, just always have stuff prepared. So that way, when you have the stuff prepared, you can walk away. And how I do things now, like I said earlier, I will wake up, 5, 6, 7, 8 a.m., whatever it is. I will work off and on between that time until maybe about 5, 6 p.m. as far as editing and posting and promotion and all that. And then if I have recordings at night, fine, but I take breaks throughout the day. And by 8 p.m., I'm like, I'm putting on Law and Order Criminal Intent and I'm playing games on my phone. That's it. Kind of thing. So that way I have the whole night between like 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. where I have 3 hours of just shutting my brain off, and then I go to bed and I wake up the next day and just do it all over again.
Oh, absolutely.
What advice do you have for new and veteran podcasters in the art of podcasting?
Don't. No. Okay. Do not come into it with a preconceived notion that you're going to be rich and famous. If you come into it with the right mindset of you are looking for a creative and fulfilling outlet for yourself, and if somebody listens to it, great, then fantastic. Come into it with a concept in mind and do it like you would do a business plan. And I'm not saying, meticulously plan out everything. I'm saying have a format ready. You can't just click record and expect magic to happen.
Right.
Decide, are you going to be a one-topic show? Are you going to be... It could just be you and your friends shooting the shit. Hey, what'd you do this week? That's fine. But have some sort of structure ready. And a general outline of what you want to do. Also, especially in the beginning, make sure that you have a timer and you're timing yourself. So if you are making reviews, let's say, and I'm not saying you were provided a review copy. Let's say you played a game and you want to talk about it. Unless it's a long form, and we do the long form discussions where we'll dive deep and there'll be 30 minutes to an hour long roundtables with 2 or 3 people. That's great. Make sure that people know that. For a standard review, unless your whole topic is that, you want it to be anywhere from 3 to 7 minutes long. Because anything beyond that and you're rambling, unless it's a cyberpunk situation where you have a lot to talk about. and if you really want to get into the minutiae, you can do that. So set yourself a timer. Also time yourself in general for random segments just to see how long you take. And we're all guilty of it. We all take sometimes pauses that are too long, or we have filler words. One of the biggest offenders is people saying,
yeah,
over and over and over again. And you'll see that happen. You will eventually find your cadence. Watch out for your filler words. If you're filling the air with those words, repeating them over and over again, or or okay, or okay, that sort of thing, when you're filling up time with those words, that is not content. That is pure filler, and it will turn people off. And we're all guilty of it, especially if you're not used to talking in public or making public speeches. And we're all gonna, like, during the show, we've both probably done it multiple times, we don't realize. But the longer you podcast, you have to become more cognizant of that and try to think about what you're going to say before you say it. You're almost better having a pause of dead air that you can edit out afterwards if you really want to, than trying to fill that space till it comes to your brain.
Yeah. And that reminds me, and this is, I don't know, of course, have to be you. Reminds me of the scene with Springer and Daniel, and Springer telling him how to use the exosuit. Think about what you're going to do before you do it. And then Daniel
transform.
Exactly. Come on, transform. Yeah. He finally does it. I'm like, oh, God, kid.
Exactly. And you can stretch out words. If you're looking for something, I'll do that here. Be like, oh, well, you can do that.
Yeah.
You can put that in there. Just try not to have too much dead air, and try not to have too much repeating words or stammering, looking for words. If you're not ready to say something, don't say anything.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Final question, which this is easy, but where can the people find your shows?
Well, if you're looking on iTunes, I don't know anymore. You can find us thisweekingeek.net, the website. It is a pretty basic site. We had to make a big migration last year due to some turmoil with the ridiculous host we used to have, which I will not name because I don't know if they would be mad. But I will say this: they deleted our entire archive without letting us know. So luckily, we had a backup of most of it, which was interesting. But yeah, www.thisweekingeek.net. That is our splash page site where you can listen directly on there. It'll have our feed. It also has different sections set up for each of the types of shows. While we don't separate our feeds directly like you guys do, there's a way to section it out where our individual posts, you could go through and just listen to only one type of show on there if you wanted to. It also links to our social media, where this week, if you go to Facebook, look up This Week in Geek, look it up as one word, no spaces, and you'll find us quicker. Same with Twitter, at This Week in Geek. You can find me at Deathphase Twig, but honestly, I'm handling the socials, so if you need to get in contact with me at This Week in Geek or feedback at thisweekingeek.net is the email. If you need me direct, Alex, thisweekingeek.net.
Very cool, very cool. All right, folks, I think that's going to do it, and let's see how fast or slow I can get through this one. Thank you for joining us here inside the studio. If you'd like to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show, there are several ways to do so. Visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can listen to and comment on all of our content. Send us email to feedback@geekcastradio.com. Here are all the ways you can listen to us nowadays. Apple and Google Podcasts. Leave us reviews, please. Spotify and any other podcatching client you choose to use. Follow us on Twitter at GeekCastRadio is for the network, at ITSSTUDIO Studio 2009 for the show. I am at TFG1 Mike. Become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/Geekcast Radio Network, and you can also check out Studio 2009 podcast over there as well. Coming up next, Steve Megatron and I talk about the amazing Ryan Reynolds film, Free Guy. So that's what's coming up next here inside the studio. For now, I am TFG and Mike with
Alex, the This Week in Geek producer.
You'll hear us back in the studio soon.
Catchphrase? Well, I don't think one up yet. Although catchphrase is a pretty cool catchphrase.